What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some good versus bad examples of route running. So if you're not familiar with this style of video, what we do is we show a bad example of a route, and then we show the exact same route but being ran correctly from another wide receiver. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things, but also, fellas, if you're a receiver and you guys would like a daily route running and on-field workout schedule that you can follow, check out that very first link in the description below for our 8-week wide receiver on-field workout plan. It's over 200 plus wide receiver route running, press release, and catching drills, all mapped out with the exact sets and reps to do. Monday you're doing this, Tuesday you're doing that, etc. And we give you video examples of each drill. So check out that very first link in the description below if you're interested, fellas. Let's get started with this video. So now, first example here is going to be some type of like slide and go release versus a DB who's lined up inside shade, and this DB plays it perfectly. Now, this is an example of why wide receivers need to be able to react with their press releases, right? On this channel, we talk a lot about, like, hey, this is, what you want to do versus this type of coverage. This is what you want to do versus this type of like, DB leverage, if you will. Leverage just means like where he's shaded. So if he's inside, that means he has inside leverage. If he's outside, that means he has outside leverage. Now, we want to have a plan. And when you come to line of scrimmage, we need to have a plan of action with this DB. However, if this DB changes up what he does and disguises his coverage or maybe plays something a certain way that we weren't expecting, as a receiver, I have to be able to react. Receivers have to be very, very good at reactions. That's why wide receivers need to train in scripted environments like, hey, we're working on this skill. And they also need to train reactionary stuff. Like I have my wide receivers work a lot of different drills where it's off of a command. Like I clap my hands, I have them do something on a specific go call, whatever it is. So they have to react and change direction because in a game, you're going to have to react. So this wide receiver, what he's trying to do is he does a kick step with his back foot. He does that to load up his hips and create some explosion. Now he does that so he could shuffle to the outside, gain some ground, and make this DB think we're doing some type of slide inside route, like a slant, like a 5-yard in, whatever it is. Now this DB, what he does as soon as this wide receiver slides, he jumps to the outside. Right? So when he jumps to the outside like this, what this wide receiver should have done, because he obviously can't change up the route, but this would be perfect if we had to run an actual slant because this DB moved off the platform. But since we have to run a fade, we can't change up the route, but what we can do is change the release that I plan on taking. So he shuffles to the outside, DB goes with him. Okay, great. Now that DB, since he moved so far off this platform, gave up the inside release. So this receiver should have put the brakes on, taken the inside release, and then worked to get back over the top on the fade. But because he forces it, because he just kind of like predetermines that this is the release that he's going to do, he slides and then he takes off. This DB's outside shade now because I don't know if you would necessarily consider this as a disguise. He just moved off his platform, right? So he moved off the platform. So now I'm forcing the outside release, but now I don't have much space because that DB's right into my hip. He's squeezing me to the sideline. And you see, guys, this is not on the quarterback. This is, let's say this. Quarterback shouldn't have thrown this in the first place, but there is no room for that QB because that DB pretty much ran the route for him and squeezed that wide receiver to the sideline. And it's all because he didn't react. If he would have taken an inside release, he would have had a chance, especially when we're past the bottom of the numbers like this, you guys. So let's play this full speed, and then we're going to show a correct example of this exact press release versus a similar coverage style. So this next example here is going to be from Tyreek Hill. So he's got a similar press coverage look as the last example. He is going to do the exact same release. Now, this DB, I would consider this more of a disguise of coverage. However, he does the exact same thing as the last DB. He starts out inside shade, but he jumps to the outside. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know what Tyreek Hill was thinking on this because I don't. Maybe pre-snap, he determined that he knew this DB was going to jump because he has some kind of safety help to the inside. I'm not going to say that. But it would be the same concept if you were to react. That slide and go release is a great reaction release. So let's watch what happens. So he comes out the ball, he slides. DB jumps. Okay, great. Inside release, let's work the stack, and you're essentially in the exact same spot on the fade that you would be with a perfect outside release and a perfect stack. And he just took the inside release. The only time I would say you can't do this is if it's an MOR fade. I hope a lot of you know what that is, but that means it's a mandatory outside release. So if it's mandatory, then you got to go, right? But that's usually because when you're running your fade route like this, you have something underneath like a 5-yard out or maybe a 10-yard out, and we're trying to take the corner out of there so the 5-yard out or 10-yard out opens up. But if you don't have an MOR, taking an inside release is totally fine Because again, you see what he does. He does it pretty much the exact same release. He kick steps, he starts to slide to the outside. And this entire time, his eyes are on the DB. He's reading the DB. DB starts to shade to the outside. Hill probably could have easily tried to force this and just use his speed, but this is a talented DB, guys. Gets hands on us, squeezes us to the sideline, especially Hill not being the biggest guy in the world. That's not a favorable throw for the quarterback. But us taking an inside release, trust me, take it from me, guys. As long as we just stack this dude, quarterback could care less if you take an inside release or an outside release. So you see what he does. He slides. He does this little crossover move, puts the brakes on, and takes this inside release. Now, this is the crazy part. Hill is extremely fast, so he's able to outrun the safety help, which is nuts. But if you're maybe, not Tyreek Hill fast, it's very important that when you do take the inside release, you try to stay skinny with him, which essentially means you're hip to hip with him when you take that inside release, so it's easier for us to stack over the top. So let's play this thing full speed one more time. So this is textbook reaction here from Tyreek Hill, guys. Releases are just as much about having a plan as it is being able to react. Okay, so now, next example here is going to be Jakobi Meyers running a 10-yard out versus Sauce Gardner. Now, easy mistake that a lot of wide receivers make at the top of the break, like in this example, is that he reaches on his cut. He kind of over-exaggerates it, which gives away the route in terms of his pad level and in terms of his speed. So let's break it down, or let's show full speed, then we'll break it down. So he comes off, and right at the break point, he reaches and gives something called an indicator. So an indicator is pretty much exactly how it sounds. You are indicating to the DB that you are about to make a break. You are no longer selling fade. So remember, we have this DB who's outside shade and zone. I got to run a 10-yard out. He's sitting outside shade because Meyers has cut his split down, right? So when you cut your split down and line up closer to your offensive line, a smart DB is going to play outside shade because he's expecting you to cut your split down to run an outside breaking route or some type of drag, and this DB has safety help to the inside. So our goal on this 10-yard out, if I do have to run it, is not going to be try to run around him because this DB is just going to keep his leverage to the outside. You're going to end up running. You're not going to have space. Very similar to that fade example that we talked about, forcing an outside release versus a DB who jumps to the outside. So our goal is to attack his inside shoulder, inside hip, make him think fade. We want him to flip his hips so I could slip under. Now, Meyers does that. He's running hard, he's attacking, but at the break point, I want you to pay attention to this arm, and I want you to pay attention to how far he steps. So he's running, and you see how he reaches out, right? So you see how far this cut is. His heel's hitting the ground first. His arm is popping up in the air. Sauce Gardner, who's reading the body language, notices, and again, this is more of a reaction for him because he's seen it before, and he's repped it out a million times. But he sees this. He's not thinking, oh, I'm looking for him to raise up. It's a reaction. But these guys are very, very talented because they work on this kind of stuff, guys. So the second you start to raise up and pop up your chest, throw the hand up, reach out, you're letting everybody in the stadium know a route's coming. And when you do that, and that cuts outside your frame, not only is that cut slower because your foot is really wide and your heel's hitting the ground first, your chest naturally raises up when you reach. And that is an indicator. DB no longer thinks it's a fade. He could settle down and get hands, but just readjust and then make a play on the ball. All because we gave it away. So when we cut, you guys, we don't want any indicators. I want my arms to stay the same. I want my pad level to stay the same. I want my cuts to be inside of my body frame. I want to cut with my toe hitting the ground first. You want your whole foot in the ground, but I want my toe to hit the ground first, not heel, then toe, because I'm reaching and over-exaggerating. So let's play this again full speed one more time, and then we'll show a good example of Deontay Johnson working a route against this exact same type of coverage. So again, see Johnson here. He has a reduced split. It's kind of like a bunch formation, I guess you could say. So like anytime that you bunch, you're obviously lined up closer to the offensive line. Smart DB is going to play outside shade. Now he's running a 10-yard out. So what he does, he attacks the inside shoulder, inside hip. But the only difference is there are no indicators on his route like the last one. So he comes off the ball, same pad level, same stride, same cut, out of that thing. And again, we don't need a ton of space. We just got to give the quarterback room to throw me open. That's the whole reason we go at the inside shoulder anyways. If you try to just run around him, he's going to keep his leverage and we won't have space. So I want you to just pay mostly close attention to his cut and how it stays inside his frame. He's attacking. He's got good hips, good shoulders, good body language. So he's attacking the inside shoulder, but look at his cut. You see how it's toe, then heel? He's not reaching. It's just bam, planning right now. Toe hits the ground first, then his heel hits the ground. His whole foot is down because you have to cut with your whole foot in the ground or else you're not going to be able to change direction. It's impossible to cut off your tippy toe, but you don't want to be heel then toe because when you're cutting heel toe, that usually means you're reaching outside your frame. And when this foot goes that way, your body language goes this way. And when your body language goes back and you raise up, DB who's watching our body language is no longer threatened by the fade. But when you could just cut in stride like this, that's easy money. So a good gauge for receivers to think about this. Cut on the ball of the foot first. Ball of the foot, then heel, or toes, then heel. And also think when you are running, your chest always stays slightly ahead of your waist. You don't want to run hunched over, but if your chest stays forward ahead of your waist, it is physically impossible to reach, and your cut can be inside your frame, not giving away the break to a DB in this situation. This is a perfect example of running that 10-yard out versus that outside shade, off man, or zone DB. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like an 8-week wide receiver on-field workout schedule, everything wide receivers should be doing on the field for route running, press releases, catching, the works, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to get you on this, fellas. I'll see you guys next time.